Now, at the community cabinet yesterday, there were a few protesters out the front. I think about 300 of them. Let's deal with Great Keppel Island. Is the casino licence now an absolute no-goer? So the promoter there has to do something else.
Well, I think the Premier gave the position pretty clearly. The 3 casino licences were offered by the LNP, have been allocated, and she indicated that if any of those fell over, that we would reopen a process to look at repositioning those licences, and if that came to pass, Cow are welcome to compete with any other proponents that might want to avail themselves of that opportunity.
So should one of them fall over, they're back in the game?
Yes, so that was pretty much the message the Premier put yesterday, and I'm very, very comfortable with that.
Now, the other situation was fishing licences, and the Morning Bulletin have highlighted a chap by the name of Graham Stevenson, who I think was there yesterday. I'm not quite sure. He says he spent 44 years of his life fishing. He can't imagine life without it. He said, we don't want these net-free zones. It's going to put fishermen out of work, shut down an industry that's been well established for years. He says he knows the restrictions, he knows what to do, he knows the green zones, he knows the gear restrictions, and he thinks that's enough.
Well, the fact is we took net-free zones to an election campaign. We have had considerable consultation with a lot of stakeholders and developed that policy, which has been developed by us in opposition over an extended period. Just to develop the policy, we've done a lot of consultation in the first place. The timing of the release of it during the campaign wasn't a matter for me, but it was ready to go very early in the piece. That was a campaign strategy issue, not a policy issue. Since then, we've engaged in very comprehensive discussions led by senior department officials, and we'll continue to do so. The Premier yesterday announced that we would go continue that consultation process, and we will do that. It's been extended for another month at least. Recently we put out provisional indicative maps of where boundaries may be, and we're taking representations from all stakeholders as we go forward.
So you'll be speaking to someone like, so this will also mean that someone like Graham Stevenson, for argument's sake, can have his say, because he basically believes that if these go forward, he'll be out of business.
Well, I understand their position. I've had many discussions over the years, well before we won government, with all the interest groups, including professional fishermen, about their views. It's not as though these haven't been ventilated privately.
Sure.
I know full well where people's sentiments lie on this. The government's made a decision about greatest economic benefit. We see the policy changes here having a much, much greater effect on the economies of the areas that are identified than current practices. That's not to say that we're not amenable to further discussions going forward, and we are. But ultimately, the plan, which I might add was supported by the LNP leading up to the last election, and I reflected that in Parliament last week, where the now member for Whitsunday wrote to the MNAC review indicating very strong preference for these zones to go ahead in these areas, and mapping out pretty much the argument that the government has presented now. And of course, we see the Federal Environment Minister has signed off on these net-free zones as part of the Reef 2050 plan. So I look at it like we've got the Federal Liberal National Party support these zones as part of the Reef 2050 plan. In the background, there are many LNP people that support it, and I understand the arguments that have been put by the commercial sector.
Have you got support from the tourism industry on these?
Well, there are tourism bodies up and down the coast that have written in support of the submissions that went to MRAG on this issue. And tourism bodies have been speaking very, very positively. I know speaking to the Mayor of Rockhampton just yesterday, they are eagerly waiting these zones to come in, and they have their own marketing packages that are being prepared to celebrate that, because they see the opportunities going forward. And anyone who looks at this, particularly in my area of Central Queensland, understands what this will mean in terms of genuine policy shift and tourist encouragement.
Bill Byrne is with us, the Minister for Agriculture and Fishing and Sport.